Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Down and Dirty show on WMNF 88.5 FM with John Digfelder, except John Digfelder is not here today. John called me this week and says, look, I got something coming up. Would you mind hosting the show? And I said, I guess. I said, that sounds like a great idea because I've been on the show many times as a guest, but this is my first time actually being the host. So John and Lynn, thanks to you guys, old dear friends of mine, and for the opportunity. Behind the scenes, I want to just recognize off the bat here at the top of the show, we've got three great crew members here helping us. Skip working the boards for us. Thank you, Skip. Anthony screening calls for us. And my friend Luis Salazar is out there doing the video and streaming live. If you want to watch the show live as we speak, and it'll be on a video later, go to the Hillsborough County Democratic Hispanic Caucus webpage and on Facebook. And we're streaming live from the studios of WMNF. So thanks, Luis, for helping us out. We got two great guests that I'll get to in a second. My name is Victor DeMaio, and just a little bit about myself. I was born in just a few blocks from here at the Central Triano Hospital in Ybor City a couple years ago. Mom and Dad are both Tampans as well, as are my guests. And my family on my dad's side was, my grandfather was first doctor of the Italian Club over 100 years ago. My grandparents on my mom's Cuban side were cigar workers here in Ybor City. So I have a lot of roots in history here. Mom and Dad actually both ran for office, public office. My mom, Mercy, was the first woman, her and Betty Casser, first woman in history of Hillsborough County to run for office. So that was kind of cool growing up. And my mom was kind of a pioneer, too. She was the first woman head of the utility accounting and water department with the city, first accounting director, woman head at the Hillsborough Community College, which is now Hillsborough College. So she did a lot of cool stuff. And my daddy was very involved with stuff all over town. President of the Chamber of Commerce, and the first Super Bowl came in Tampa. He ran the parade along with the Gasparilla crew. So I have a lot of deep roots, but I have a history. I started out back in actually in college with a buddy of mine, Jim Williams, who's up north, who's listening in today, up in Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. And we were really into sports. And my thing was I was trying to figure out a way to get in the Bucks games for free. So I figured out if I can grab me a radio station and do. He said, just get a radio station and do the calls. And I said, okay. And I did. I worked for WFLA, WDAE, and all the other radio stations around here, and did that kind of stuff. And then when I went to college, I also did it up in Tallahassee. So I do have a history of doing that. And then later on, during the week, I'd cover the legislature and politics up in Tallahassee. And during the weekends, I'd cover the Seminoles and Gators and have fun doing sports. So today's show will be about politics and sports. The first half, we're going to do some politics stuff, and I'll tell you about that in a second. And the second half, we'll talk about some sports stuff with the Tampa Bay Rays. So sitting next to me today is our illustrious Hillsborough County property appraiser, who's I guess great-grandfather was the last mayor of West Tampa, Bob Enriquez.
He was indeed.
Bob's been, this is his fourth term, and he's done an outstanding job turning that place around and getting it to roll and assessing our taxes. And that's where we're going to talk about that property tax issue that's on everyone's mind, of what the heck's going to go on in Tallahassee. And next to Bob is another very, very dear friend of mine. His name is Patrick Manteiga. Welcome this morning. Patrick is the third-generation publisher of the 100-plus-year-old La Gazette newspaper, one of the few newspapers left in town. Patrick's grandfather came here to be a lector, which is the man who sits up in the little crow's nest in the cigar factory. This is in the days 100 years ago where they had no radio, no TV, no cell phones, no smartphones or beepers. And he would read the paper, and the cigar workers would actually hire him and give him a little bit of their salary.
Actually, both our grandfathers were electors.
Your grandfather was elector, too? That's right. I was at the History Center the other day, and they were talking about your grandfather being the last mayor of West Tampa. So, Patrick?
Great-grandfather.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you for having me, but you haven't mentioned my real claim to fame. I'm Angie Manteiga's husband.
There you go.
Thank you, Angie,
It's going to be a better week.
Patrick. And one thing that's cool about Patrick that we'll get into in the second half of the show is he's also the chairman of the Hillsborough County, Tampa-Hillsborough County Sports Authority, which runs Raymond James Stadium where the Buccaneers play, and have a little hand in the Lightning and the Yankees Stadium, Steinbrenner Field.
Golf courses,
Legend Field.
A few other things, yeah.
And a few other things, yes. He also runs the beautiful 100-plus-year-old Cuban Club in Ybor City as the foundation chair and president. So we love to go to the Cuban Club for stuff. But anyway, let's get into it. We're going to talk about the property tax situation. Mm-hmm. Bob, you've been to Tallahassee a bunch of times. I guess you've testified or talked to the legislature. There's a few bills going on. As you know, the legislature is, and Bob served in the legislature 4 terms. At that time was District 58, which is basically covers West Tampa, in town and country, about
parts of Seminole Heights,
about a third of the cities, Seminole Heights. In town and country, and the airport and the stadium, that was all part of your district when you represented West Tampa. So, and of course, they're one thing the legislature, not when Bob was there, but maybe a little bit. They're really good about wasting time, and they had 60 days or 2 solid months to come up with a budget, which is what they're supposed to do, and they didn't do that. So now they're moving the budget off to a special session. They're moving this tax thing to a special session to get rid of all homestead taxes, and then of course there's also redistricting, which is another nightmare, for our Congress people. So tell us what's going on and why we should pay attention.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned that I assess your taxes. I just want to make sure people, just as a matter of clarification, I assess the value of people's property, but we don't assess taxes. It's important to know what the Property Appraiser's Office does, but probably more importantly, what we don't do. The tax authority set the tax rates based on their budgets that they're projecting for any given year. And we just figure out how much stuff is worth, and we don't collect taxes as well. So that's important. And then, you said we're going to talk about politics and then sports, but actually we're going to kind of talk about the politics of sports more than actual sports.
Let me get this clear though, Bob. So you're not to blame for my taxes, right?
Well, you can blame me for anything you want, but technically
you're not to blame.
Technically not. So. Now, if you don't think the assessment's right,
can we point fingers at who is to blame?
Well, I think that's what's going on. So let me kind of summarize it like this. We have no idea what's going on in Tallahassee. So
they don't know.
They don't know. Let's kind of the history of this is, and first of all, for the listeners, I'm kind of as was alluded to by Victor, in kind of a unique position because I've been in the legislature. I kind of have an idea of how things work up there. And then I've been the property appraiser for 13 years, so I kind of know how the property tax process works as well. So this is nothing new. About every 20 years, it seems like someone comes up with the idea of doing away with the property taxes in the state of Florida. Marco Rubio, when he was speaker, thinking about whatever his next thing might be, which ended up being U.S. Senate, of course, and now Secretary of State, he proposed something similar to this, and it really didn't, at that time, didn't go anywhere. The legislature, who, as we know, have had record budgets for a number of years, all of a sudden last year kind of found their fiscal responsibility gene, and rightfully so. And the governor came out with this idea out of nowhere that we're going to be the first state in the union to do away with property taxes altogether.
Right.
Big, crazy kind of idea that would be about a $60 billion loss of revenue for the state if you did away with property taxes altogether. No other state. All 50 states have property taxes in one form or another. Over the course of time, they realized that was too much of a heavy lift. And really, honestly, this was a concept that he threw out and then handed to the legislature, who they're the policy makers. And so he handed off this really big idea and kind of leveraged them into, how do you, given the makeup of the legislature, how do you turn down an idea that's too good to be true? But it's incredibly complicated. So the politics of it is easy. None of us like paying property taxes, including myself. I'm mad at myself a couple times a year. But so the politics of it's pretty simple. Now, I will tell you realistically, and we know this because I'm in the office every day, this is interesting because we really weren't seeing this groundswell of anger related to property taxes. Obviously, people are feeling the squeeze in terms of economic insecurity, and all of us are feeling that, and really more along the lines of property insurance, particularly since we went through the storms and what have you here. Now, since that time, there's been an uptick of probably people that are a little bit more, I want to say, I'm not going to say angry, but they're clearly more tuned in to their property taxes. But really, the folks that have been most affected by increasing values have been folks that have purchased within the last few years, as we had the mass migration and values soared. So it's interesting because it's kind of, the outrage is we weren't seeing that prior to this. That being said, the legislature took a look at it and said, okay, we can't do a $60 billion loss of revenue. So now we're going to, and remember, anything you have to do along these lines has to be a constitutional amendment. So what has happened is that they've kind of zeroed in on homesteaded property. I would argue that that's largely because the vast majority of people that vote are homesteaded property owners.
Right.
And so, you've got to get to 60%, and you want to get the political juice out of it. So, that's where we are. The governor's office really, although they promised a plan, really haven't put one out. The Senate kind of sat back and said, we're going to take a wait and see attitude. The House was more they took a much more proactive view, put together a select committee, came up with a number of ideas. Like 6 of those, I think, were considered during the legislative session. At the end of the day, they passed one House joint resolution to go to the ballot through the House. Now, remember, there's 3 legs of the stool here. One of them doesn't matter because the governor doesn't have the ability to veto, doesn't have to sign a joint resolution to go to the ballot. The Senate did not act. The House passed House Joint Resolution 203, which ultimately said that you would do away with all homesteaded property taxes except for the school portion, should it go to the ballot and pass. I will tell you that that's in Hillsborough County alone. That's about $800 million of lost revenue.
Wow.
They really have not had a serious discussion of how you would replace some of that. Politically, they've thrown out this idea that there's all this waste, fraud, and abuse. As we know from our experience in Washington, there is some of that. There's always going to be things that you can look at. You can tighten your belt, but $800 million is a big number. And then in addition to that, they said in the House Joint Resolution something that is not anywhere in our Constitution, the state of Florida, or anywhere else that I could find, including the federal Constitution, if you still care about the Constitution, in which they put a spending mandate for a specific line item, which is public safety. Now, we all want to make sure we fund public safety, fire and police and what have you, that says that you cannot ever, that their budget has a floor, which is the higher the last 2 years' budgets, that budget can never go down, again. I would argue that also kind of creates a ceiling, because if the local jurisdictions or taxing authorities don't have any money, how do they fund public safety? And ultimately, there have been a number of studies in the larger counties, focused on the larger counties, that have said that because that's the largest single line item in their budgets, they're not going to be able to, with that loss of revenue, be able to fund public safety. So the numbers really don't work, and they haven't talked about seriously where the money would come from. Whether it be raising the sales tax, whether it be this idea of the people coming down here pay through a tourist tax or something like that, there would have to be something backfilling it over the course of time. Ultimately, nothing that matters. They sine die. They finished the 6-day session, as you spoke to, and now everything is sort of starting from ground zero. They're talking about a special session, which my experience is they're never special nor a session. So the idea would be that they would have something done, ready to literally have some kind of a cursory debate on, and then vote on it in a special session. But they're really struggling with what that might be.
Right.
So I would tell the listeners, stay tuned. It may be something as small as raising the homestead exemption, which we tried a few years ago and failed at the ballot, all the way up to what the House proposed to do away with all homesteaded property taxes, with the exception of schools again. But it's right now it's really up in the air. We've heard that maybe they'll punt and impanel the Constitutional Revision Commission, next year, and they let them deal with it in a more contemplative manner. But I think that the governor is very much set that he wants this to be his crowning achievement as he leaves office. So we're everywhere and nowhere at this point.
Wow, that's crazy. Before I put Patrick in here for a second, I want to let all the listeners know, if you want to get in on a conversation, our studio line is 813-239-9663, 813-239-9663. If you want to get on a conversation. My name is Victor Mayo. This is Down and Dirty on WMNF 88.5. Patrick is also, I didn't mention that in his paper, he's the columnist of As We Heard It. Patrick's probably one of the most astute political writers in the state of Florida today. A lot of people tell him stuff, and he knows stuff, and he's going to really fill us in now. I mean, now, Patrick, you've written extensively about this.
Sometimes he calls me and says, "Tell me something."
Yes.
I got nothing this week. Tell me something.
And
when I'm looking for expert advice on property taxes, I call Bob, and we've had several conversations about this. And I have to, so I think the reason why, number one, we went out of session without a budget and without property tax. Without a solution to property taxes is that the Senate and the House leadership do not trust each other in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
You cannot compromise between two people if they don't trust each other.
That's a good point.
The House doesn't like the governor.
Right.
Governor doesn't like the House.
Correct.
And so so a lot of this isn't about facts and figures. A lot of this is about personal animosities. A lot of this is about personal distrust.
And the individual priorities, which the minute the budget's signed, they go away.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
And so this is going to continue into a special session also.
Right.
I mean, especially on property tax, on the budget, they got to come up with something.
Right.
And then the other issue is that, the governor, I think, started this off as kind of an affordability issue. And instead of trying to reduce our prices on homeowners insurance, which most of us would like, he decided to take it a little bit easier and say, well, we'll just get rid of property taxes because that's a problem of the city and counties. They live off of that.
Right.
The government, the state government doesn't feed off of county and city property taxes, so that's what he's attacking.
Right.
Now, this guy's spending money left and right on Alligator Alcatraz and a whole bunch of other things, but he doesn't want to rein in that spending, but he would like the county to stop spending on parks and rec. He would like the cities to stop doing river walks and parades and things like that. And so, but, and Bob and I have talked about this extensively, is that a little property tax reform wouldn't be a bad thing.
Right.
And this could be something as easy as expanding homeowners exemptions.
Right.
Maybe making that based on the median price of a house in different counties, so that the benefit would be larger in Miami and Hillsborough County, where prices are higher.
Right.
And it'd be less in places like the Panhandle, where prices are low, so that those counties could still collect property taxes.
Right.
And that would be good. We also talked about things such as being able to inherit your parents' house, but also inherit their current property tax level.
I will tell you that is, and that's the suggestion that I had made as well. Although that is complicated, but that is in the tax package this year, and so that could end up passing.
And it's great as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you have a kid, you want to leave the house, and the second they get the house, their property taxes are up 50%, and they have to sell the house immediately. And it's their childhood home, and these also aren't big numbers. At the end of the day, this doesn't kill a government.
Right.
It makes them rein themselves in a little bit. It makes them sharpen the pencil. And so, these things I think are out there, and I think there are some but killing the property tax for cities and counties is a ridiculous, idiotic, stupid thing. And how we ever even got down this pathway is absolutely ridiculous. And I don't think the Senate's going to agree with this. I hope they don't. I hope there's something a little bit more. But the House, the Senate, and the governor have boxed themselves in.
Right.
They went down this stupid road.
There's an expectation now that something has to be on the
so
ballot.
they've got to do something.
Right.
And so they boxed themselves in. I think the governor's been kind of silent on this because he realized he really didn't want to go down this road.
Right.
I think this was going to be the basis for Casey DeSantis's run for governor. And now that maybe she isn't going to run for governor, he doesn't really really want
We
to go
think.
along this thing.
Well, I mean, I think the big.
And you said property tax is number one accomplishment. No, getting his wife to be governor would be his number one
Well,
accomplishment.
Well, but he's also the rumor is he wants to run for president again, and this would be his little shiny achievement. Is something he can claim that he did. So,
And a couple things to mention, and you know, Patrick, obviously I have to use a little different language, you know.
I'm not elected. You
Yeah,
are.
I know, and I don't want to get taken out of office, so you know, those of us that, and this is between the Property Appraisers Association and those of us that have been up there and myself, I've thrown out a number of different ideas, that I think are real property tax reform. Some of the things that you've mentioned, because really the issue lies in the reset, as you spoke to.
Right.
You buy a home. Let's say somebody's owned the home for 25 years, 30 years. They're paying on a much lower assessed value because of the Save Our Homes cap than the next door neighbor that just bought the home within the last couple of years. The cap comes off, the assessed value or the resets to the just market value minus any exemptions, and they start the cap all over again. So you've got one person living next to somebody that's paying, $800 in property taxes here in West Tampa or East Tampa, and somebody else next to them is paying $7,500. That's not out of the ordinary. And I will tell you that under the proposed plan that the House passed, that person that just purchased within the last few years, if you came down here during and bought a luxury home on Davis Island, somebody that's been living on Davis Island for a lot longer time, that new person is going to get a much bigger tax break than the person that's been there for a long time. I am heartened by the fact that there was some discussion from Senate leadership in which they said whatever we come up with has got to be more fair and equitable across the board. They're starting to see the intricacies and how difficult this policy decision is. So that's probably a good sign. We'll see what comes through.
Well, if you want to get in on a conversation, my name's Victor Mayo. I'm here with Hillsborough County Property Appraiser Bob Henriquez, and the publisher and owner of and writer of La Gaceta in his column As We Heard It, Patrick Manteiga. This is the Down and Dirty Show on WMNF 88.5 FM. If you want to get in on a conversation, the phone number to call is 813-239-9663, 813-239-9663. And we have a couple people on the line who may want to get on the conversation. Peter from Tarpon Springs. Peter from Tarpon Springs, you're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
And
Good morning.
This is a great topic to talk about. I just want to point out, though, that this is just in the long line over the last 20 years or so that this Republican legislature and government has been whittling on home rule and home rule powers on cities and counties on one way or another. Local law, SB 180, and now that things are passing about diversity, and you know the whole story. But the thing about what you mentioned, I have 3 properties, 2 rentals. So if you get rid of my homestead for homestead, it's going to raise the taxes on the rentals, so the rent's going to go up.
Correct.
So those people are going to be affected. Businesses are going to be affected. That's going to raise prices on commodities, goods, and services. The other thing is that you mentioned in Tarpon Springs here, over 50% of our budget goes to police and fire. And with the executive order that public service workers are now first responders, they're now included in the language where it says first responders. So now you're probably talking about 75% of your budget of a city. So what does that leave? You cut out your libraries, your parks, some of your infrastructure work you need to work on. It's just a mess. And again, as you mentioned out, it's an ideological thing. It's easy to say, oh, property taxes, they're bad. Nobody wants. But if you look at it, our taxes go up slower than the insurances. And I do have, since the property appraiser is there, this is an idea I thought about. When someone buys a home, let's say it's at $250,000 and their taxes $1,000 a year. Why should my taxes, if I bought that home at $250,000, go up every year because somebody else paid more? Cap the taxes at whatever you purchased the house at for the life of that house. This way you'll give stability to those people who bought that house. They know what their taxes are going to be. You're still going to have a steady income, and it will balance out over time. So I don't know if the property appraiser has a suggestion or how that could be accomplished, but to me that'd be another way of solving some of the property tax increases that go on unaffecting because of someone else purchasing a property and not your own property.
Thanks, Peter, for your question.
I think, so to your point, your last point, that was something that was discussed, but that really is along the lines of the California model. That's been a bit of a nightmare there. So they've kind of, anything that's California, they don't want to do in Florida. So, but that was discussed. Now, what you could do is you could say that the assessed value couldn't go up a certain percentage for the next owner. And then you also could create a percentage for homesteaded properties in terms of how much is taxable. Because in Florida, the law says that we have to assess the value at 100% of just value. And then you take out the caps and any exemptions people qualify for. The issue with that is if you look at a state like Georgia or some other place that has that says that you can only assess at a certain percentage, say 65% or 60% of actual just value. Is that in those cases they have much higher millage rates because the tax authorities make up the difference. To your other point about local control, which my experience being in the legislature was it was local control when it was befitted the state. Well, we'll just we'll just send it down to we don't want to deal with it. If indeed you had to find additional revenue, say through increase in the sales tax, first of all, it's regressive. We know all the arguments about that. And also probably, if I'm going to buy a new car, I'll go to Georgia and buy it or someplace with a lower sales tax and drive it back. It's highly volatile in terms of what the economy is doing. The larger issue in my mind to that is sales tax is administered at the state level. So the amount of power that would give to the states. So think about every taxing authority. And remember, we're not just talking about Hillsborough County, City of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Tarpon Springs, the cities and the counties. There are other taxing authorities. Within Hillsborough County, you have the Port Authority, you have the Aviation Authority, right? You have the Children's Board. You have other folks that have the ability to levy taxes for property taxes. All of those tax authorities would have to go to the state every year to argue, or beg for their budgets. That's an awful lot of power to the state to try to decide, and frankly, it gives the state the kind of, wiggle room to do the things we see in Washington. Well, you have a certain parade we don't like. You have a certain policy we don't like. You didn't endorse me in the last election. We're not going to approve your budget until X. So, again, there's an argument to be made there that's not the best way to fund local government, because right now, although not enough people probably do, if you don't like the way the spending is going on at the local level from your property taxes, at least you have the ability to go to a hearing and say, we would rather not have, for your second part of our show today, we don't want to spend money on the stadium. We don't want to spend money. I'd rather have my pothole done than the Riverwalk, whatever it may be. Otherwise, you'd have to go to beg each of the taxing authorities to the state every year, and would kind of take the individual citizens out of that. Out of the ability to be able to really have control at the local level.
Well, Patrick, you're written about the Port Authority as well.
One thing that you didn't mention, I think should be mentioned, is when you certify the tax rolls, city government, county government, they see this and they see what the increase of revenue is going to be, but they don't have to. They could lower the millage rate to get the exact same revenue they had the year before.
Right.
And many of the times they don't do it. And so they actually are coming up with a tax increase without increasing taxes by allowing the millage rate to stay the way it is. So there is a mechanism where I could try to keep they could try to keep my 3% increase a year on my capped homestead taxes that they could keep it basically neutral. But we've seen in the last few years that both the county, and certainly the city, has been allowing whatever additional money to flow in and not reducing millage. They've been, in fact, even talking about increasing it. So they've been ending up with increases of revenue at 9%, 10%. Large revenue increases over the past few years.
Well, and again, I think, and that's philosophically, that's a big thing. Is this a spending issue at the local level? Which I think originally the idea really was just that property taxes were too high, and then we've kind of seen that that it's more of an issue of spending at the local level, which with what the CFO has done and the DOGE efforts in Washington that have filtered down here. If that's the case, then we should have that discussion, and that's a legitimate discussion. We should all be good stewards of our public tax dollars. But if that's if it's a spending issue, let's talk about it as a spending issue. But we're kind of wagging the tail, the tail wagging the dog here. And the reality is, there's been, and one of my time in Tallahassee, I remember folks talking about, well, if we starve the beast, right? So if they don't have it to spend, they won't spend it. Yeah. So maybe that's what this is. But let's have that kind of sober conversation rather than talking about it
and lead by example on the state level. Like I said, these people eat money and they spit it out all day long on no bid contracts and everything else. So if you want to show the counties and cities how to be financially responsible, I would tell the governor to check his own books.
Well, Alligator Alcatraz is going to cost $1 billion.
And it's a no bid contract.
Right, no bid contract.
And we're not going to get reimbursed.
I thought we were getting reimbursed for that.
Yeah, and now we're going to
checks in the mail.
Sure.
Yeah, the checks in the mail, right?
You just can't trust Trump to write the check, can you?
This is the Down and Dirty Show on WMNF 88.5 FM. I'm here with Bob Henriquez, our Hillsborough County property appraiser, and Patrick Manteiga, the publisher, editor, and writer of La Gazette, the newspaper. And as we heard it, we've got a bunch of people is litting up the lines here. Let's see if we can take a caller. I've got Sherry Donahue up in Temple Terrace. Sherry Donahue, you're on the air. Are you still there?
Good morning.
Morning.
Really,
Thanks.
I'm listening to this awesome group. What a collection of brilliant
Sherry, I think you probably could use that in a lot of different ways. When we all get together, the three of us, we're all really close friends, and we are a very interesting group. I will agree with you.
You are. That is not said like, oh, that's a baby. It's not one of those comments.
This isn't the same Sherry Donahue, whose brother-in-law is the president of the sports club, is it? From
yes,
Temple?
He is.
Yes, okay, thanks.
Right. About 20-some years ago in Temple Terrace, the city council decided not to raise taxes. As a matter of fact, to cut taxes. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? The citizens showed up with $20 bills and said, I want my library opened up again as it was. They were angry that they had saved pennies to lose an amenity that they had come to appreciate. And that is the benefit of local rule. Because the next year, they adjusted. They made sure that they brought the library back, that they brought the other things. Those amenities are what cities want, and that's why they agree with their council. If you don't like your city council, vote them out.
Right.
But you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, which is the revenue that pays for things that people don't see. It pays for sewage lines. It pays for sidewalks.
Right.
It pays for all those things that
Parks.
None of us are willing to give up. And you hit the nail on the head. If I have to go to Tallahassee and get in line to ask for a sidewalk in my neighborhood or speed bumps, I mean, the list is long. Mm-hmm. So what a shame that this power grab looks like it's a good thing for citizens. And the inequity in what people will spend will be immediately felt when we have to raise money somewhere. And then, even though we won't see it, and also, how in the heck can a city budget if they don't have any idea how much money is coming in, because all of a sudden people stop buying things?
Right.
Sherry, I appreciate your call. One of the things I'll bring up along those lines, and it's interesting because I had lunch with your mayor not too long ago. We talked about this issue and a number of other things. One of the things he brought up to me was, it's interesting because we all kind of want all those services, all the things that make this a special place, or the things that we're entitled to or feel like we're entitled to as citizens. He brought up the fact that a few years ago he had talked about maybe trying to lower. Remember, there are things on your tax bill. There's a real estate portion that obviously I assess the value, or my office assesses the value of property. So there's a real estate portion or ad valorem based on the value of your home or property, business, what have you. And then there are things on there that are non-real estate assessments and fees that are on your tax bill. And we don't talk enough about those things. He talked about a few years ago, he wanted to try to save some money for taxpayers of Temple Terrace. And he said, well, we'll change the contract so that we'll only pick up garbage once a week. and they showed up with pitchforks and lanterns and said, no way, we've got to have. So people kind of want all these things, but there's a cost involved in that. But that's another thing that'll happen. So I think that's one thing that if you have to find revenue somewhere, I could see the cities and the counties then saying, well, we're going to have to raise those fees for different things. So it's going to come from somewhere. You push the balloon on one end, it's going to pop out somewhere else. So I appreciate that because it gave me an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. Because remember, those things aren't affected. In fact, they'll probably go up as a result of this effort.
Well, for TV time remaining, as we say it in the old Championship Wrestling for Florida show, for the last match, we've got some. I like to spend. I promised everyone we were going to talk about sports, and I'd like to move into the whole controversy or question or excitement, I guess, depending on what side of the fence you're on, about the Tampa Bay Rays settling in Tampa on this side of the bay, which they haven't been heretofore yet.
Right.
And they kind of eyeballed a piece of property there on the corner of Tampa Bay Boulevard and Dale, maybe right across the street from Raymond James Stadium, where Hillsborough College is now. And Patrick, you've written extensively about this, and Bob, this is something that taxes are going to have to pay if the city or county is going to pony up and be half partners. And we're very fortunate this morning to have the chairman of the Tampa Sports Authority here, Patrick Manteiga. And I wanted to start with you, Patrick. What do you hear so far since you're on the inside? And we can talk about opinions. And again, if people want to join the conversation, it's our studio line is 813-239-9663, 813-239-9663. This is a very hot topic right now. So give us a call, too. So, Pat, take it away. Sure. What do you think? What is going on?
Well, first of all, I'll just do a little bit of legal clarity here. Since my board has not had a vote of right. how it feels on this, my opinion is as Patrick Manteiga, publisher of La Gaceta newspaper, which is probably more enjoyable opinion and a freer flow of information than the Sports Authority chair. I think we'd all love to bag another professional team here. I think we'd all would love to have the thrill of being in a World Series and you're cheering it on and you get a parade afterwards and we all feel like we're winners,
right.
As we've done with the Buccaneers when they've won Super Bowls and we've done with the Lightning when they've won Stanley Cups, and it's a great feeling, and these are the intangible things that make a good community fun and neat, and it gives us all something to cheer on and get on the same page. And that would be great if they said, well, we're going to buy some property and we're going to build a stadium and you guys just buy tickets. But that's not the way professional sports work. So they say, well, we want you to pay for half, and we want this and we want that and we want the other. And so there's a list of demands here that the Rays have given. So far, everybody's been smiling and saying, oh, this all sounds great, but nobody's been handed the check at the end of the dinner.
Right.
And seeing how much the lobster really cost. And we're getting ready to start having that conversation. And so the Sports Authority is an organization that doesn't tax anybody. We don't have any money to hand out. So we are where the city and the county come together and say, okay, you're going to help us with this and you're going to have the expertise to do this. And so one of the things we're looking at is that what stadium do you want to build? How much do we believe it's going to cost? Right. And so, therefore, if we're talking about dividing something, we want to tell the public what that division is, not have the Rays do it, because, of course, we are the body they should trust because we're their representatives.
Exactly.
And so currently there was a letter that went out this week that basically said, we don't have the information we need to do this. The Rays have asked for the county commission, the city council sometime in April to sign off that they're going to get CIT money. Which is community investment tax money that we haven't started collecting. It's a sales tax that this community approved. It's going to go on for 15 years, and I believe it's a half cent.
Half cent, yes.
Yeah, half cent,
penny, right.
Added to our sales tax. And so, anyway, we don't have the facts to know what true money is needed. We don't have the facts to know what other tax revenue we're going to be able to pull in for them. They're looking for a combination of money from from property taxes that are collected in the district they're in. They're looking for CIT money. They're looking for a bunch of little pots of money, and each one has its own tricks to get into.
Right.
Each one has its own facts that you need to understand what the impact is. And so we sent a whole long list of questions to them. The Sports Authority did, basically asking that we need this because we hired a company named AECOM to help us get an understanding of what the financial impact is, what new taxes will be brought to the community because of their expansion here, and then what we might be able to pull in revenue for that to be able to hand back to the Rays. And we don't know, first of all, they don't want to just build a stadium. They want to build a whole bunch of restaurants and hotels and
shops,
condominiums and all this.
Right.
And they want us to tax those and then hand them back those taxes. But we don't know what they want to build. We don't know how many stories. We don't know what the value is, and they've given us nothing to do. We've got a few pretty drawings, but we can't put a value on drawings.
Right.
And therefore, they want us to bond out CIT money that we haven't collected.
Right.
They want us to bond out CRA money that we haven't collected.
Correct.
And that we don't know how much we're going to get. They also want us to bond out CIT money that we haven't gotten a dime of yet.
Right.
And that we promised a whole lot of other things for the CIT, and we promised them on a ballot. We're going to use it for transportation. We're going to use that money for fire stations. We're going to use that money for certain things, new police cars, new fire trucks. And so if the Rays take the first bite of the community investment tax,
right,
that means everything else takes a second bite.
Correct.
That's not what I think anybody envisioned when they did this tax. They thought we would do transportation first and fire stations and bond out maybe 70% of this money to get this stuff rolling. And so the Rays have come up with this concept that when we did the CIT, we said, well, this is the amount of money we're going to collect.
Right.
And then we'll figure that after the first year, there'll be a 3% gain.
Right.
So the Rays have said, well, in reality, there's going to be a 4.5% gain. So that 1.5% over the 3% is fair game.
Right.
So
right.
You didn't commit it to anybody. Let me have it.
Right. Correct.
And that would be great if we had put this money in savings over the years and not
right.
spent it.
Right.
But we've never collected it.
Right.
And we don't know if we're going to collect 4.5% gain a year, 5%, or if you're going to have a pandemic and you're going to get down to 1%, or
right.
you're going to have 2 hurricanes in a row and you're going to be 2%.
Right.
And if we don't collect the money that they say we're going to collect, then it has to come out of somewhere. And so
Correct.
now you start to spend the money you promised for roads, for fire stations,
right.
on the bonds and paying back the bonds that you did for the stadium. So their timing is based on what they want. The timing is horrible for us because we also might have a reduction in property taxes. Right. And this could certainly change the way governments looks at these other pots of money. And so, right now, I think everybody would like this stadium, but they would like it to be affordable. They would like it to make sense for the community.
Right.
And there might be ways of doing it, but $1.15 billion is just tough number to come up with under the current circumstances. It could be an even harder number if there's a property tax reduction down the road. And so I guess the big issue is the time frame they want would mean that we would not have the facts we need in order to move forward. So they're asking our public elected officials to move forward on a hope and a dream.
Right.
And build it and the taxes will flow in. And we just don't know that.
Right, and you've written extensively. In fact, if people want to pick up a copy of this week's, like I said, the newspaper.
I invested half of my ink in my column this week to the Rays. And it's just a bunch of questions that still have to be answered, and they're extensive.
Right.
Can we call it the Field of Dreams?
The Field of Dreams, absolutely.
Well, your nickname is Coach, so I know football's your life for many years. Head coach at Tama Catholic and playing at Princeton. But the other thing we didn't mention is the Bucks. The Bucks.
Well,
Patrick and I, we worked for 30 years ago on this. CIT
realistically, Raymond James is towards the end of its
30-year
its life, not lifespan, but in terms of its fallen behind. All the other stadiums out there, the billion-dollar stadiums that have been built elsewhere. So they are already looking towards the future and what they have to do. They've already been told by the NFL, my understanding, that we wouldn't be able to host another Super Bowl until they do certain things with the stadium.
Right.
most importantly, not allow us to sit on the surface of the sun, I guess, in August and September. But so there's a lot going on here, and the timing of this it's a heavy lift. I mean, they to make this happen by 2029. To have shovels in the ground, it's March 20th, and we're talking about shovels in the ground this summer to make that happen. Permitting, I don't know that if you wanted to build a house, you couldn't get permitting by the summer, I don't think. So so they're asking for certain breaks from that standpoint. Going back to the property tax thing, we just don't know at this point what where the funding is going to come from. Should there be a loss of revenue at the local level? It is kind of an interesting, it's ironic, I guess, that the state is spending local, taxpayer dollars in theory because they're, you've got the governor who's given some land to this effort and is all in on it.
And putting pressure on all of his appointees and all of his friends down here to fund the raise and give them whatever they want to. So
at the same time, banging the drum about all the waste, fraud, and abuse that's happening at the local level, which again, that is a legitimate. I think from the waste portion is a legitimate discussion. It certainly is. I don't like using the term fraud and abuse because that's criminal and intentional. But that's a legitimate thing. But how can you speak out of both sides of your mouth? And on one hand, you're okay with $2.5 billion stadium. I saw yesterday. I'm all for it because I'm a big fisherman. The state will come down and build a new fishing pier for us and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot to that. And remember, and Patrick alluded to this. To forecast into the future, tax revenue, and that's the other thing. We don't have a plan, so we really don't know what's going to be taxable, what's not going to be taxable. And they really need to lay that out, I think, for the decision makers, the folks that are going to have to vote on this, the county commission and what have you, is dangerous because you just don't know. You could have a downturn. We're seeing now what's happening as a result of some of the decisions that were made in terms of the war and what have you. We really don't know what's going to happen down the line. So if you're saying that you're counting on a certain amount of growth and tax revenue as a result of building this, and that'll be phased in as well. I mean, you're going to have a stadium that really is not going to be producing a whole lot of tax revenue immediately.
Right.
All the ancillary things that they're talking about building around it, in theory, would.
Right.
But how long before all of that is developed?
Correct.
And remember, things don't provide tax. Taxes are until they go on the tax roll,
right.
which is when they're quote substantially complete, which really is CO.
Right.
So just because they've broken ground or they've got a crane that's building a high-rise hotel next to the stadium, it may take 2 or 3 or 4 years before it's actually built. When does that revenue start to come in?
Right, and if it's ever built, I mean, the reality is that building booms are you have building booms and busts, and we've been in a boom for a while. And so the ability of getting somebody to finance, a couple $1 billion worth of construction 3 years from now might be impossible because there's just nobody wanting to do that at the moment because nobody's, buying condominiums or nobody's doing this, that, and the other. I mean, we've been blessed in Florida about this growth, but the reality is that we are not going to stay at this pace forever.
Right.
There is going to be some downturn here eventually. And so we just don't know, it's a lot it's a lot of faith to say, I believe it's all going to go perfectly. And in this way, and what the amount of money they want, everything has to be kind of perfect for 15 years after this for everything to work out for us.
Well, that's true because I'm president of Hillsborough County Democratic Hispanic Caucus. We had our dinner meeting last night, and a lady that works with Hispanics that we work with told me in the school system, there's a couple of thousand less kids going to school and they're all Hispanic. They're all, I said it on EDU, last week. I said the Hispanics are scared to even go out of the house, go to the grocery, take the kids to school because ICE is lurking around trying to cast them in. So you're right. There are factors like hurricanes and things like that we're actually losing. I heard a rumor is a property tax, is a revenue going up or down? Are we even or?
We're honing in on that now. Last year we had basically a flat tax roll. With the increases were largely as a result of new construction. Originally we thought this year would be similar, and now we're seeing that there may be a slight increase. It really it's not across the board. There's different. The luxury home market some other other things that are those areas have been strong. The haves have
Right.
in their spending. Not so much in just your sort of median homes. So, but overall, it's not nearly as robust as we saw, say, between 2019 and 24.
Right.
And we couldn't have sustained that in that level. So again, you just don't know.
Right.
Now the fundamentals are there that we'll continue to have a growing tax roll over the course of time. But will it sustain? Will it be sustain what we're talking about here? We just don't know. There's a lot of
politics
unknowns.
get in the way of it. I mean,
Well, that's
Right.
the other thing. The other thing is the longer it takes for the county commission to take a look at this more closely, and the city council and the sports authority, all the folks that have to come and and lock arms, the closer you get to an election, and then it becomes we know at that point people are going to start to wonder, should we be spending on this?
I've
or
never
something
seen
else?
anybody be voted out because they didn't build a stadium. I've only seen people been voted out of office because they did build a stadium.
Right,
Yeah.
that's true.
It's you don't see the mailer saying, "Oh, they didn't get the raise, so fire them."
Right.
Is Charlie Miranda in black yet?
He'll be by. He'll be
Good,
there
I'm sure,
soon.
yeah,
He'll
he
be
needs to-
black soon. So we just have a few minutes left. So I'm Victor Mile again. This is the Down and Dirty Show on WMNF 88.5. Thanks. We appreciate people listening. With my guest Bob Henriquez, our Hillsborough County property appraiser and coach, and Patrick Manteiga, the publisher, editor, and owner of the La Gazzetta newspaper, and the writer of the weekly column As We Heard It, that you need to read every week. I read it like religion, as long as I can possibly remember.
Did I read, Patrick, that the Rays had suggested that they would pay for overruns, but then that was kind of, questionable as well. What would be termed an overrun?
Yeah, so when we were talking about value engineering their roof, we gave them a study that says we believe you're spending $300 million more on a roof than we actually need to, and we could spend this. And they said, well, but we'll pay for overruns, so we really don't need to pay attention to you. Well, what they really don't understand is that the Sports Authority's job in this whole role is going to be to say, okay, so we're going to look at the stadium plans, and we are going to evaluate what the cost of that stadium is going to be. And we're going to say there's certain things we will pay for and certain things we won't pay for. If there's a team store within the building, we're not paying half of that.
Right.
We're just that's going to be taken out of the equation.
Correct.
And then we're going to divide what's remaining.
Wow.
And so, if the public is going to end up owning the stadium, so the public needs to know how it's built, needs to know, if it's built well, and we're going to put a price tag on this thing. So when we're trying to reduce the price of this, it isn't because we don't want to have an overrun. It's because we want to reduce our half of
Correct.
the bill.
And the taxpayers.
So we would like to build this for $2 billion, so it's $1 billion in cost to us, not 1.15.
Correct.
Or bring it down even further than that. So that's part of the Sports Authority job, is take a look at this and give the county commission and the city of Tampa what we believe the cost is going to be and what we believe the best stadium would be here. And so, the little add-ons, the extras they want to do, luxury suites, we don't want to pay for. Let
Right.
them pay for it, and
Right.
but we're going to take it out of the equation, so that when we're dividing the price of the stadium, it isn't with luxury suites.
Correct.
It's without.
Correct. Well, I want to thank the crew that's been with us today. Skip on the board. Thank you so much, Skip. I want to thank Anthony, who's been screening our calls. I especially want to thank Luis Salazar, who set up our video today. You can watch it later on if we're broadcasting live from the studios of WMNF 88.5 FM. It's on the Hillsborough County Democratic Hispanic Caucus Facebook page as a live streaming option. And we've got how much time left? 1 minute. And I want to especially thank John Dingfelder and his lovely wife, Lynn Marvin Dingfelder, for allowing me to host a show. And want to many, many thanks to Bob Henriquez, our Hillsborough County property appraiser, for being a guest today. And my dear friend Patrick Manteiga, again, for being a guest today and filling us in this quick, short hour that we had.
Just a quick plug here.
yes,
I think we're all going to
thing.
be at the St. Joseph's Feast later on.
Yes.
Headed there right after
Yeah.
this.
So if you're listening, go over to Sons of Italy and give a donation, and and be part of the community and help everybody out.
And now Noto's over there cooking the
And what I
spaghetti.
did, one thing I didn't mention, Vic, if you've got 10 seconds, on our website, Hillsborough County Property Appraiser's website, we have a calculator that you can go on. It'll be real time as things continue to percolate about this property tax reform, where you can put in your information about your property, and it'll tell you how much you might actually save based on what passes.
And if you want information, LaGazetteNewspaper.com is that a web address?
Yes.
Okay.
Very
Well,
good.
thanks again. I appreciate your listening in. This is Victor DeMaio signing off. This is Down and Dirty Show on WMNF FM 88.